they look at the agricultural industry as something that doesn't matter. They believe that food is grown in Sainsbury's and Tesco's.
Yeah.
And whenever they want it, in many of the urban areas, they go down to the end of the road or the shop in the local city, and they get whatever they want, or it's delivered to their door. They don't see the supply chain.
Everyone, and welcome back down to the farm for Down on the Farm podcast, the podcast that brings people from all walks of life down for the farm for an open chat about all sorts of topics, hosted by myself, Henry Carpenter. And it's been a while since we sort of reminded myself why we started the podcast. The main reason being me having an accident on the family farm at the age of 14, sustaining life-changing injuries, and having a lot of years of rehab later. I've learnt so many life lessons that I want to share with the listeners, and I love just getting involved with people and learning all about them. So this is me starting the podcast. And yeah, welcome if you're a new listener. And this week's guest is Stuart Anderson, MP for South Shropshire, a really, really nice guy and a legend in my books. Already having a really successful career in the army, apart from having sustained a serious injury at the age of 17, being shot in the foot, he's spired on into a political career, doing so much already, from Shadow Military Defence, Vice Chamberlain, Law Commissioner, and used to be MP for Wolverhampton South West, and so much more, as I found out during the podcast. I find this episode really intriguing because I get to interview an MP about the family farm tax, his views on it. He's on a complete different party. He's in the Conservative Party, not the Labour Party. So he's got nothing to do, obviously, with what's happened to family farms and the family farm tax that's being brought in. But it's really interesting to hear his views on it and how he's trying to improve it for all the people that he looks after, all the farms that he looks after under his constituency. Also, we talk about the Midlands Air Ambulance First Farmer on Safety course that has been offered, and he's been the main pioneer in terms of political leaders for that, and it's been great how much he's pushed that. So we talk all about that, and also he's very open about his journey in terms of mental health and how he's achieved what he's achieved in a person already just in his career. He's just such a lovely guy, and I'm going to introduce him now. This is Mr. Stuart Anderson, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Down the Farm podcast. Hope you're well. Thank you for inviting us into your office as well, up in Ludlow. Can we just start with your background, political career, really? I know you were in the army before. You've done a really cool, very mixed roles of obviously Shadow Military Defence, then Vice Chamberlain, Law Commissioner, and used to be MP for Wolverhampton South West. So where did this political journey really start for yourself?
It started very late in life now. So I'm 49 now. And I was 38 before I ever voted. I had my very strong views on politicians, and my view was probably naive. Actually, some might be proved right, that there was a bunch of clowns in Westminster, didn't know what the country needed and had no real world experience. I grew up in Herefordshire. As soon as I was old enough, I worked on a farm. All I wanted to do was be a farmer. Couldn't get into that, so leaving school with no qualifications, I joined the army, became a soldier, spoke about getting shot even while I was 17, the rehabilitation, the impact that had mentally and physically, but then went straight back a year later, back onto the front line. I was on my first tour in Northern Ireland, did Bosnia, Kosovo, left, and then worked around the world in security and defence. But I've got 5 children, and I wanted my children to grow up in a country that they could be proud of. And I believe over multiple governments, we'd lost our way, and the country wasn't the country that my children were going to grow up to be proud of. Now, I'm exceptionally proud to be British, but decisions have been made by politicians over decades have ended up, we're in a situation where a country is dividing. It doesn't have a clear view of what his identity is. So I wanted to bring that real world experience I'd had into politics. So I stepped and joined the Conservatives in Herefordshire. I literally knew nothing about political parties, but I looked where I was aligned. I was a Conservative. And then I stood, that was 2016. 2016, the first time I voted was 2015. I then stood as a councillor in Herefordshire, Kingsacre, in 2017, and I saw that I could make a change to people's lives, and I wanted to take it to a bigger level. So I was elected for Wolverhampton South West. There was no seats around by me, so you've got to try and see where you can make an impact. I was chosen 2018, fought it for a year, won in 2019, and then got to Parliament. And then in Parliament, I thought, oh, what next? I didn't actually think I'd like it when I got there, but I found it was a way of life. It was like the military. You were helping people every day, but it was like trying to drink a swimming pool through a straw.
Yeah.
It was a very hard job to get your head around, and I wasn't from a political world. I'd only ever been to Parliament twice before in my life, and you have to try and figure that out. And it was at the time after I got immersed straight back onto the Defence Select Committee and NATO Parliamentary Assembly, meeting other countries' defence ministers and doing reviews around the world on where we were globally in defence, and I was loving it. And then I stepped into the Whip's office when Boris stepped down, put me in there. I got promoted. I stayed in under Liz Truss, and then stayed in under Rishi Sunak. Got promoted and eventually was Vice Chamberlain, part of the Royal Household, which is a phenomenal job, one of the senior whips. And then in opposition went to Deputy Chief Whip and Shadow Defence Minister, and chose to step down. I'd moved seats into South Shropshire, change under the boundaries. The first rule I think you must always do is be a good constituency MP. And there was many conflicting things for my time. So I wanted to see my family and make sure I was a good constituency MP. So I stepped off the front bench for what is just over a year now, and immersed myself locally in South Shropshire, which I've loved. And I've seen more of my family.
That's brilliant. I mean, I think you've gone up there, you've enjoyed it, you've made the most of every opportunity you've been given. It's funny how you mentioned you didn't vote till, was it 38 you said?
Yeah, 38.
Because I mean, the first time I voted was when I think I was 19 or 18. And still then now, I still don't follow politics enough to really give enough empathy or whatever to really care who was in charge. Obviously now with the farming stuff, that's kind of changed my opinion. But do you think it's really important, especially younger people like yourselves, go into schools and start doing talks and educate about how politicians work?
I think that's a very valuable point. I tried to be every month, sometimes twice a day on a constituency visit. I've been in a school. I've reached out to all the schools. I love it when they visit Parliament. And I tell you, one of the best Q&A sessions you can do is with children with no pre-prepared questions. I tell them a bit of the story of how I got into politics, of what I've just done there. And they ask you everything and anything, and it's unfiltered, but it's brilliant. And to help try and get them to understand of the basics of politics is brilliant. And then as you go up through secondary school into sixth form college, to see the passion, some people wanting to step into politics, that's really inspiring. But we've got to look at those generations coming through. We've got to see, what do you want your country to look like, and help shape it and get people like that involved. And I've just had a meeting with a 23-year-old businessman in Ludlow, loves the area. How can I make Ludlow even better? And that passion is what you need to basically empower.
Absolutely. I think that's now going on to the farming thing, is that people don't see a lot of the passion that comes from the community. I think you sometimes might lose that if you're going to London and down there, and that's possibly might be what's gone wrong with the whole thing that's going on. So moving on to farming, obviously it's a big part of South Shropshire, the agricultural world is all around us. Obviously there's town folk as well, everyone's equally as important. But for yourself, first thing I want to talk about is this new Midlands Air Ambulance base. We were there last week and we were promoting the new first farmer on scene safety course. So could you tell us a bit about that and why it's so important that possibly even people in the Midlands get involved, but elsewhere as well?
So these are one of the things that you get to see the fruits of some of the things you do, because you get asked to try and campaign, champion, solve so many different issues, and we try and do everything we can. And this is one that I was so excited to see, because as you mentioned, South Shropshire, huge farming community, a quarter of my constituents are involved in agriculture. So it's been high on the agenda. I want to champion farmers. And when I met with Midlands Air Ambulance, they said, what can we do together? I said, what medical training or what can you do? And they said, we can do a first farmer on scene course. And I said, well, let's make it happen. Within 6 months, and this is where we first met, within 6 months, we were running a course in South Shropshire for farmers with Midlands Air Ambulance. Now, credit to them. They were proactive. They ran with this, and a lot of people say, I've got an idea. Well, let's make it happen. I love it when people have that passion to move it forward and are proactive. So now, when you look at it, if you're out, could be working 16, 17 hours a day as a farmer on your own, week in, week out. You get tired. The weather can be bad. You have a slip on that tractor. As you know better than anyone, what you've been through, something goes wrong, it falls, it moves back, and before you know it, you're in a critical situation. You're on your own, or you have one person with you. How do you keep that person in a stable enough condition, or keep them alive for long enough for the air ambulance or the ambulance to get to them? So this is vital. There is still way too many accidents and injuries and deaths in the farming community, and whatever I can do to help within that area, like helping Midlands Air Ambulance launch this, I'll definitely be doing it.
Absolutely. I think, does it maybe link back towards maybe possibly the army as well? Because I suppose that can be quite a big thing if something, especially when you're higher up in the army and the politician sort of side, if something comes into play like a scheme like that could save lives on the national board, is it important that we push this to perhaps Air Ambulance in the UK and push it abroad? Would you be interested in doing something like that as well?
Definitely. So I think whatever we can do to provide that vital time of support and stability about keeping people alive, meaning that they don't lose that arm, they don't lose that leg, they can... Having that time is important. And you mentioned the time in the army. When I was in Northern Ireland, I did what was called a team medics course. So you go as far as drips, clearing airways, and things like that. And our role was to keep people sustained or alive from a gunshot wound, explosion, for a very limited period of time. But then when I went to Bosnia, I did the role of the platoon medic. We were hours away from anywhere else, and some remote locations. It's how do you keep somebody alive for X amount of days, X amount of hours, sorry. Sometimes that could extend to days, depending what level you're doing. But we don't know how long it is going to be before that person can get help. And one of the things that is key, and I've raised in Parliament, I got it from my survey, the remoteness in South Shropshire is a beauty. Yeah. But connectivity is very hard. There is still a huge amount of places around the constituency that don't have mobile phone signal. So you're on that farm, someone's leg is trapped under a tyre, it is you with them there, you can't get signal, you can't leave them. How do you sustain them and find a way to raise the alarm or keep them stable to then go to a place where you can get a phone signal? All of these things. And they all sound good in practice, but that's key to it, is putting it in practice time and time again, and it's having a response and knowing what to do. Absolutely.
I think that's the thing, that accidents happen all the time, and especially in rural areas. I think for me, when mine happened, we were literally, they didn't even believe that we existed as a farm because the farm name's under a trust, so it all gets complicated. So things like 3 words and stuff, that's brilliant there. But no, it's great to hear that you're pushing that sort of thing.
Well, can I use a little example? As you mentioned, my own experience of getting shot was a live fire. I was 17, 2 days before my 18th birthday, a live firing attack in the Brecon Beacons. So friendly territory. I got shot. We're supposed to cease fire. The grenades were about to go in and clear the trench. We checked fire while the other team went in. I heard an explosion. I saw my mate screaming. I thought, oh no, he's been shot. I went to move and I realised it's me. Oh, my leg's hot. Oh, I've been shot. So there we are in the UK with the might of the British Army. The Land Rover could not get to me because it broke down. The ambulance the medic didn't have any morphine or anything. I spent hours on the side of a mountain, not able to get off with the might of the UK Armed Forces. And you know what my mates did? They stabilised me and then they laughed and joked and took the mick out of me because that's the military humour. But it was hours before I actually got into a hospital where they told me they were going to take my leg off. So
yeah. I know, that's just the craziness of it, I suppose. But that, I think as long as you're safe, that's fun to laugh at. But yeah, like we say, it's something that needs to be improved on, I think.
I can laugh many years after.
Yeah, 100%. Probably wasn't laughing at the time.
I definitely wasn't.
So moving on to another obviously huge thing that's in farming at the moment. So myself and many of our listeners who are farmers as well, has been a really tough time in the last year and a half, 2 years. Not only from this family farm tax that's coming involved, but also the price of everything, for production costs, the selling costs, to even buying livestock, it's just gone ridiculous out the roof, and the margins on farming is just impossible at the moment, especially British farming. So I think, I don't know where you sit on the fence for this, but I think there's a lack of understanding from the government, possibly the Treasury as well, of how farming is actually funded. I think they don't understand that every sector of farming, if this does come into play, even though I know they've raised the bracket now, will be affected. Like for ourselves, we're machinery parts, that's our family business, is tractor machinery parts. If we lose customers in customs because they can't afford to keep farming, even small farmers who probably be a good 20-30% of our clientele, that affects us. That may be leading to possibly laying off somebody who's lowest on the chain, and then that affects the sector before us who are financial advisors. Then after, you've got the people who are insuring the farms. It might just affect every single bit, and founders' job will be lost. In terms of somebody who is on the opposition, is a different, completely different political straight. You're Conservative, this is Labour in charge. You don't really have a say of it. As a MP for someone who is looking after a lot of agricultural people, you're sort of being hit in the face with this, really, in terms of how you can face this and how you can support your constituency. So how have you managed to support them? How are you trying to sort of make a difference and say your say in that?
Yeah, you raised some good points there. And first of all, if I look at the government side of things, I believe there is definitely a lack of understanding linked with an ideology. So they look at the agricultural industry as something that doesn't matter. They believe that food is grown in Sainsbury's and Tesco's.
Yeah.
And whenever they want it, in many of the urban areas, they go down to the end of the road or the shop in the local city, and they get whatever they want, or it's delivered to their door. They don't see the supply chain and the value of the supply chain. Just today, there has been an announcement about the reserve forces preparing for the time of war to increase their age. Why, at the same time, is the government not saying food security is part of national resilience, and we are going to do everything we can to ensure that we are a stable country that has food resilience? And that first looks at how we adjust from farmers to start to become the price setters, not the price takers. And this will be a saying that every farmer will have heard for a long time and just go, it's never going to happen. We need to change, and some of the deals that the Conservatives did were not in favour of farmers, and that's wrong. We need to ensure that nothing is coming into the UK that undercuts our farmers and means that they have their hands tied behind their back. And only last week in the Chamber, I raised the point of the Ukrainian eggs coming in substandard to the UK, undercutting our poultry sector. It's not acceptable. So we've got to look at that. There is a complete education process that I think the farming community have done an amazing job of campaigning against APR, BPR, the family farm tax, as we call it.
Yeah.
What can I do? I can give them a voice. So sometimes people say, do you only care about farming? Because I'm continually pushing out on that. One, because there is so much we have to hold the government to account and get them to reverse. And like, if you take, first of all, the family farm tax, they are taking this as a massive win. And I use the analogy, you're about to have an operation, they're going to take both your legs off, you only have one taken off and you think you've won. That is their mindset on this. The family farm tax, the APR and BPR rates were not in under the last government. They brought them in on absolutely devastating rates, and now they've adjusted it up to 2.5 million, and they believe this is a win. There are farmers in South Shropshire that will have assets over 2.5 million that will be on the minimum wage. And they don't get that. They're trying to say it's the Dysons. James, credit to anybody who wants to do well. He paid 100 million in tax last year. But people are all trying to say these landed gentry. That's how Labour are trying to portray it. It's not the case. They don't understand this. Look at FIPL. I called for FIPL to be extended. It just has. Almost 50% of South Shropshire is the national landscapes. SFI stopped all of a sudden, and then the uncertainty of when it was going to get brought in, how it was going to get brought in. Upland farming have just been excluded, I think, from any of the latest announcements on funding. And I met the upland farmers, both in the constituency and in Parliament. Labour don't get it. And one of my jobs is to continue to meet with farmers, listen to them, Next week I've got the Clun AGM dinner,
Nice.
Clun Farmers. It's a great community, and I'm listening to them. I'm putting ideas of how we can take things forward. I understand the government process, but how to give them a voice. And I think it would be fair to say that I bang the drum continually for that, and will do that as well.
100% doing the research. Following you for a long time anyway, since we last met, I've been following your stuff, and every week there's been countless times a week you've been out posting sports, even the hunts while you were at Ludlow Hunt the other day.
That was quite interesting, because you mentioned earlier, I don't know if you're going to sit on the fence. I don't sit on the fence.
Yeah.
So when I went out as a candidate, and I met with all the went to the puppy shows, met the hunts, and I went out and said, I believe in your way of life. I grew up fishing, shooting, hunting. I grew up doing that. I believe it's a rural way of life. When the time comes for a fight, I will be there. And then I saw, we went out with the Beagles on New Year's Eve.
Always good fun.
It was great, beautiful weather, great people. And people said, you told us you'd be there, but you were another politician. We've now seen you are true to your word. And this is an attack on rural way of life. It's an ideology, and they're all saying it's a smokescreen. Fox hunting's illegal, trail hunting follows a scent, and there's a whole ecosystem around it. So I have no problem standing up for what I believe is right, and I'll continue to fight for this.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that. Obviously, I stick with it as well. I shoot. I used to hunt family all and racing as well, and jockeys, etc. So we farm, but people don't see the 24-hour, 7 days a week of looking after your livestock, looking after the ground, and then maybe having the one day where you're going, shoot birds that you've reared for 6 months, looked after, and it's a cruelty element to it, but again, it's the tradition of it, and people don't understand that actually farmers, this is a real sort of lifeline for them. They'll be very lonely all week, and it'll just be this one day that they'll have to socialise, and there's people who literally will, if this gets stopped, it's going to be a really massive, even with mental health wise, it's going to be a real decline in mental health, even though there's been a big issue in farming already. So it's great to hear that all your support on that front. What sort of, is those sort of your main goals then for you as a Conservative Party in South Shropshire? Are there any other goals in terms of non-farming as well that you're trying to achieve in the next year?
Yeah. So as I say, farming is one sector with that, a key, one is of huge interest. I live on a farm estate. I don't farm, but where I am, I'm 15 minutes from the closest shop to get a pint of milk. So you look at rural communities. The rural way of life is different to the urban way of life. So there's some interest that cross over, obviously, but trying to champion the rural way of life, supporting local businesses, champion in the farmers to get the best investment in our infrastructure, to seeing the children can have the best education that they can. And obviously with my background in defence, and I think that there's over 4,000 veterans in South Shropshire, very heavily pushing on that locally, but you also have that national interest, and my lane, I would say, is defence in Parliament. I've had my life in that world, so I add value in that style, in that area. But there are multiple things. You mentioned mental health. I've spoken of my own challenges, even on my maiden speech and right the way through. I talked about getting shot. I had a year's rehabilitation in Hereford at the SAS camp. My dad had been in the SAS, died when I was young, and my regiment wanted to amputate my foot after a month of being in hospital. And the SAS said, give him to us through the SAS Association. It's very kind of them. And they rehabilitated me, which was quite brutal, but got me back on my feet. But never did anybody ask, how are you doing? I was 17, shot, told I was going to lose my leg, and went through probably one of the lowest points in my life, and had to build everything up. And when I got back into my regiment, they just gave me a weapon and sent me on an operational tour. So alcoholism was a way for me to suppress the screaming in the night. Violence, I have spoken about this. I had rage beyond rage, fighting, and this was like encouraging the military, in garrison towns and things like that. But actually I was spiralling so low, and later in life I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. And what I'm able to do is for people to see that I'm a normal person that speaks openly of how I have had mental health issues, and for 15 years that went undiagnosed, untreated, till I ultimately went to end it all and take my life. And in that moment I couldn't do it, and there's many reasons why people get out of that. For me, I found my faith in God. It gave me the ability to get through an hour, through a week, through a month, rebuilt my life, and wanted to see that nobody ever had to experience the life I had. And I've been able to help many people who've been in their darkest hour. We get some horrific things come through the office, and we're able to help people who don't have hope and don't have a way forward. But actually, I was with a group within Defence last year, and we were talking about veterans, and I said, look, I've been diagnosed in the past with complex PTSD. Now, everybody, tell me honestly if you've now thought, hang on a minute, Stuart's got a problem. Because there's stigma attached to it.
Absolutely.
I'm bringing that to the normal sort of way of life. People need to think about this. And if particularly a remoteness, we've seen, I think, more suicides in the farming community than anywhere else. We have suicides in every part of this community. And I believe that the time is from when you start spiraling downhill, it's about 28 days before you get to that stage where you can't see a way through. And it's how do we use experience that I've had to bring that. There is no stigma in this. If you need help, there should be something there for you.
I admire those words, absolutely. I mean, I was myself after my accident. I had PTSD for a while, but I was actually knocked out when I had the accident, so that sort of faded out. But I still have severe OCD, anxiety, and I was depressed for about 2 years because a 14-year-old, like you say, young person, I think we can relate to both of us being young at the time. I'm 20, so it's only 5 years ago, so it's still now. And OCD I talk about a lot as well because it's something that I have to still deal with. It's obviously obsessive compulsive disorder, so it's almost like you have worries in your head, and it used to be compulsions. It's not compulsions for me anymore. I managed to control that. There's still a lot of things going in your head which are quite disgusting things, stuff like that, which can happen because obviously you experience that trauma. But like I say, I go and do talks about it as well, and I did actually have the opportunity to go to some schools and talk about it because it shouldn't be something that I almost think that the mental health trauma is far, far more than physical. Whenever I've got a lot of friends I've met on this journey of recovery who have been through far worse things than I have, and that everyone will agree the mental health, talking about it, is so much more than you having your leg chopped off or broken your neck or whatever. So I think it's great we have to push this through schools and also push it in society. And I think a lot of people are doing it now. I still live in a farming environment, so it's not exactly still happening with farmers. I think farmers are one of the people who will probably try and be stoic, which is great, but at the same time can cause problems. So it's good that we need to push this.
What I have found is, because I've been what I'd say is vulnerable in sharing my story, and a whole host of me to stand up in Parliament didn't want to do that. Just want to say, I'm going to be a good MP, do this. But I've been given a national stage, and I wouldn't be doing justice to the position I've been given. And because I've spoken out about that, I've sat with people who have broken down in front of me. We've been able to get support and help who wouldn't have seen doing that normally, standing in front of this ex-soldier saying, I'm broken inside.
Absolutely.
I need support or I need help. And I look at it as, if you have a car and you take it to the garage once every 15 years, it's not going to be in a good place. Every year you do an MOT check, you reach out and you talk to like the trail hunting. There's communities that around South Shropshire that this is the only lifeline some of those people have.
Yeah. They
go to quiz nights, they go down to the local pub, the village hall, the church, whatever that is. And actually through the remoteness or rurality, through funding, through different ways, these avenues are starting to close down, and you end up people, they might not see anybody else through that week. That's lonely. They might not have transport. You start spiraling down. And that is why I think it's important to speak about it, do everything we can, remove the stigma. Everybody faces a hard time. Let's talk about it. And if you talk about it at that time, more often than not, it doesn't become a problem. There is always like what you faced or what I faced, you have those serious incidents. But for my time in the army, you didn't discuss mental health. they'd take your weapon off you, it's the biggest sign of disgrace, and you left. So nobody's ever going to discuss it. They have changed. But we do need to, the farmers are very stoic, stiff upper lip, but I'm trying to help break that down with people like yourself. And we are making progress.
I think so. I think the worst thing for me was, because of my age, young teenage lad, same as 17 again, you don't want to talk about your feelings too much. That it got to a point now where I thought it was such a low point. Obviously, I was almost suicidal as well, pretty much was, nearly. And because of such a state, I couldn't walk properly. I literally body couldn't function. My whole left side completely stopped working. As a 15-year-old person, seeing your mates going out and doing all the stuff they're doing, even though it was COVID, which helped a bit, it was all like too much, and all the other stuff. But I think for me, being a young person, young lad, they got to realise they can open up and they can speak about it. And even when I was working out in Kenya, because I've done quite a bit of work out there for a children's charity, just being out there for 3 months and the openness of it, and everyone just... these kids have been through the world. I mean, a lot of the kids have been raped, like the girls, the young girls are raped. They've seen their parents be massacred in front of them. This is the reality of it. But they take a new outlook to life, and actually it can be done. I mean, they're probably the big example to me that it could be done, because they have been through the worst, nothing you could even imagine would happen in the UK, even if it does a bit, obviously. So I think that's something we can take hold of. Just one thing to end on, though. What kind of advice, somebody who's really passionate, enthusiastic like yourself, of doing change and wants to go into politics, what's the one bit of advice you give them as they're starting out?
So the first thing I'd say is get involved. So, or maybe one step before. Politics can be brutal, depending on what level you go into. But the further you move up, the more brutal it is, but the more you see change. But you can change your street, your village, your community, and you can give people a voice. And you mentioned about schools. I love going to see school councils. Somebody who's their class thinks they're going to be the voice for that class at 6, 7, 8 years old. And I sit down with them. We want to get this for our school. And they're giving them a voice. This is what you can get locally. There is a lot, if you look at the mainstream media, you can get so focused on what's happening in Westminster. And normally, having been on the inside on successive prime ministers, I've seen what's happened on the inside and what happens in the press. And there's normally different agendas aligned within that. It's not always as accurate as you could expect. But if you look at what's going on in your community and how can you help out, get involved in a local party. Get involved in standing as a councillor and learning how you can represent people. I'd love you if you want to get involved and join the Conservatives, get in touch. I'll be happy to help out. But actually, I do meet people that want to get involved in politics that aren't Conservatives.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody that wants to get involved, then we should champion that. You need good people coming through of all experiences and all ages. And I think it's great. Just get involved. Find out how to reach people locally. Give them my contact details. Reach out to my office. And we can point them in the right direction.
We'll drop those down below. Thank you very much for coming on, Stuart. Hope you enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
I've just been reflecting on the drive back home from the Ludlow office about our whole chat, Stuart and I. And it was just so nice to meet a political leader with such a positive outlook for his community and for the farming community. It's just so nice to have that backing, and yeah, it's just a real positive chat. Obviously, if you want to get involved and start your political career, that's the man you need to go to. In terms of the family farm tax, it must be tough for a lot of listeners listening, even in my farm, and I see farmers every day because of the family business who are struggling, and it's not easy at all. But I urge you to put your trust in a person like this man to strive us forward, and together, as farmers, we can come over this. In terms of mental health, I'll put some mental health support links below, but I think it take those points away of both of us speaking openly about our mental health. It doesn't have to be an issue, it should be something we speak about every single day, and I prioritise mental health. That's the number one thing I think about most days, because your mental state really, really is important. But thank you for listening to this episode. Go and check out the other episode we did last week with Air Ambulance Charity, which is our first one of the year, and follow us at Down the Farm Podcast on all our social media platforms. Hopefully we'll bring another cracking episode for you to enjoy next week. But stay safe, guys, and have a lovely week. And as ever on the podcast, from us to you, don't be afraid to go down the pub and give your fellow mates a hug.